Vanessa entered the bank building, feeling incredibly anxious. She was about to apply for a substantial loan, and now she was worried whether her application would be approved. She took her mobile phone out of her pocket and checked for any missed calls. Fortunately, everything was calm. Vanessa had paid her neighbor to look after her 4 children. After all, the little ones were still too young to be left at home alone. At just 26 years old, Vanessa was already a mother of many. It was all because she had taken on the responsibility of caring for her 3 nephews, who had been orphaned after the tragic death of their mother and Vanessa's own sister, Anna. Anna and her husband, Harry, had died in a fire at a countryside retreat 6 months ago. They had gone there the day before their 7th wedding anniversary, wanting to celebrate the special occasion differently. Vanessa and Martin had gifted them a trip to a new camping site. No one could have predicted that on the night of the tragedy, a short circuit in the wiring of the cottage where Anna and Harry were staying, along with 5 other tourists, would suddenly erupt in flames. The fire quickly engulfed most of the 2-story house, completely blocking the main exit. When Vanessa received the call informing her of her sister's death, it felt like the world around her had crumbled. Her heart was filled with such intense pain that all she wanted to do was scream as loudly as her lungs would allow. "Martin, my love, how will I go on without Anna?" cried the young woman on her husband's shoulder during the farewell ceremony. "It's my fault this happened to her and Harry." Vanessa couldn't stop blaming herself for what had happened. If only she hadn't thought of giving her sister that cuss trip, Anna would still be alive, and Vanessa wouldn't have to watch her sister's coffin slowly descend into the cold grave. Her husband, Martin, gently stroked Vanessa's shoulder and held her tightly as she sobbed inconsolably. "Vanessa, please, calm down. You mustn't blame yourself. This was a tragic accident that no one could have foreseen." Martin was also deeply affected by the loss of his relative, but he tried to remain composed. He knew he was now the only source of support for his devastated wife. "Wherever Anna is now, I'm sure she's in a better place. Please don't cry. You need to be strong." However, Vanessa only gripped the sleeve of his jacket tighter and shook her head mournfully. Her face was pale and wet with tears. She was incredibly grateful to her husband for his support, but he couldn't fully grasp the extent of the pain that was tormenting Vanessa. Anna wasn't just a sister to her. They were twins, and their bond had always been as strong as that of identical twins. Vanessa was only 3 minutes younger than Anna, so she rightfully considered herself the younger one, and Anna had always protected her from various troubles and misfortunes. Sometimes, Vanessa felt like her sister could read her thoughts. Anna could understand her younger sister's inner state with uncanny accuracy. They were always together, shared their deepest secrets, and could honestly talk about any topic. And now, Anna was gone, and Vanessa couldn't even imagine how she would go on without her. Accustomed to relying on her older sister in everything, Vanessa didn't just feel empty, she was emotionally shattered. The only consolation for Vanessa was that her sister's children, 3 lovely boys, were unharmed. They had stayed home with their grandmother while their parents were on their camping trip. Vanessa knew that there was no other option for her but to become the guardian for her nephews. When she told her husband about her decision to adopt the kids, she saw nothing but understanding and support in his eyes. "Of course, my dear, I'll be more than happy if our Karen grows up under the protection of 3 fine gentlemen," Martin said with a faint smile, "and it'll be much more fun for them all together." "Oh, Martin, I'm so grateful to have such a kind and understanding husband." Vanessa embraced him tightly. "How could I do otherwise?" her husband replied. "Yes, it might be challenging for us, but we'll manage." Vanessa leaned on her husband and allowed herself to relax for a moment. Martin was her closest and dearest person after her sister, and now, it seemed, he was the only one she could fully open her heart to. They had met in college, both in their final year. Vanessa had dreams of becoming a seamstress in a prestigious atelier, while her future husband was studying the basics of automotive mechanics. The young couple fell in love at first sight and decided to get married right after graduation. Martin intended to move to the big city because it offered more opportunities for them to find good jobs. Vanessa, with her mother's approval, followed her beloved. Kimberly, Vanessa's mother, had known Martin's parents for a long time and was delighted to hear that her daughter was going to marry such a wonderful young man. Besides, Kimberly understood that there were no prestigious jobs for her daughter and her future son-in-law in their hometown, so she accepted the couple's decision to move to the metropolis calmly. She remained in their hometown herself, telling Vanessa to settle down properly, and when the time came, they would invite her to the wedding. Vanessa and her fiancé tried to convince Kimberly to move with them, but she remained steadfast. "I have my own affairs here," Vanessa explained to her mother. "Who will take care of my property? Besides, what would I do in your city? But when I have grandchildren, it'll be different. I'll come to visit you, and I'll take the grandchildren with me every summer." The young couple sighed and left Vanessa's elderly mother in peace. After all, it was her decision. By that time, Anna had already left their family home. She was highly gifted in mathematics, so she went to study in the metropolis right after high school and got into a university. Just like her younger sister, she met a great guy during her studies and was now actively preparing for her wedding. Learning that Vanessa was also planning to get married soon, Anna was thrilled. "Vanessa, that's fantastic," she exclaimed over the phone. "Of course, move to the city with Martin. And here, Harry and I will definitely help you. We're all one big family now." In the end, both sisters' weddings took place on the same day, and that moment remained forever in Vanessa's memory as one of the happiest. The spouses were content with their lives. They had managed to settle in the city, and Vanessa continued to maintain a close friendship with her beloved sister. Meanwhile, their husbands, Martin and Anna's husband, had quickly become best friends. By that time, Martin had found a job as a private company's delivery driver, while Vanessa had gradually started sewing for the atelier, working as a seamstress from home. Anna became pregnant almost immediately after her wedding and gave birth to 3 brothers one after another. As for Vanessa, she and Martin's daughter, Karen, was born only 2 years after their wedding. She was an incredibly adorable and clever girl who adored soft toys and animals. And now, after 5 absolutely happy years, Vanessa was forced to bury her sister and take in her children. Karen, being very young, didn't fully grasp what had happened to Anna. Her parents had only told her that Anna had gone to heaven forever, and now her cousins would live with them. The boys, the oldest of whom was 5, already understood what had happened to their parents. They had been present at the funerals and deeply missed their mom and dad. But gradually, the children began to recover and even started playing with their cousin. Vanessa, watching this, could finally breathe a sigh of relief for the first time in these difficult weeks, because only God knew how she had been worrying about her children's fragile psyche. By adopting her sister's children, Vanessa had become a mother of many. Now, she and her husband were entitled to some financial assistance for the children, but when all the paperwork was done, it turned out that the money was catastrophically insufficient. It wasn't even enough to buy clothes for all 4 of them, and children at that age seemed to be growing almost every hour. So, Martin decided to go to work as a laborer on a construction site to earn more money for their family. "I'll send you money for the kids every week," Vanessa's husband promised. "Don't worry, my employer is reliable. Just take care of yourself, dear," his wife pleaded. Vanessa struggled to hold back tears but tried to stay strong. She knew that Martin was doing this solely for their family's sake. "Don't worry, my love," Martin gently touched her face. "Thousands of people work like this every day, and they're fine. Besides, when I come back, we'll be able to buy everything the kids need." Vanessa nodded, unable to speak a word. In her mind, she understood that her husband was right, but her heart refused to accept the separation. "Please, call me every day," she finally said. "Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep until I hear your voice." Vanessa clung to her husband as tightly as she could. She didn't want to let him go. Her heart, still not ready to part with her spouse, longed for him as if they hadn't seen each other for weeks. In response, Martin passionately kissed his wife. To be honest, he didn't want to go so far away either, but what could he do? It was one thing to feed and clothe just 1 child, and quite another to do so for 4. "Vanessa, just focus on the good," her husband told her, and an overflow of emotions even brought a tear to his eye. "Think of me every evening, and rest assured, I'll feel it." "Of course, my love," Vanessa exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. "I won't just think of you, I'll pray for you." Martin hugged Vanessa tightly once more before leaving. After that, he assured his wife that he would keep in constant contact. After saying goodbye to the children, he stood at the threshold of their apartment, gazing lovingly and full of concern at Vanessa and the little ones. Only then, with tears welling up but held back, did Martin manage to leave. The next couple of weeks were relatively normal. The spouses were constantly in touch, but then something very strange happened. Martin suddenly disappeared. He simply stopped communicating. No calls, no messages, nothing. At first, Vanessa thought her husband must be extremely busy at work. However, no matter how many times she dialed Martin's number, he remained unreachable. Martin couldn't have turned off his phone. She worried there must be something terribly wrong with him. Vanessa tried to push away the dark thoughts, but it was difficult. Something deep inside her was screaming that something terrible had happened to Martin. The final straw for Vanessa was a horrifying nightmare in which she called out to her husband, who was walking ahead of her, knee-deep in deep snow. "Martin, Martin," she called out repeatedly, trying to get his attention. But when he turned to her, her face was met with a horrifying sight. Her husband's face, frozen white like a sheet of paper, stared back at her with completely empty, lifeless eyes. Vanessa could literally feel the danger looming over Martin in those harsh lands. The young mother rushed to the police station, hoping they would immediately launch a search for her husband. However, the police officers didn't rush to action. "Just calm down, ma'am," the officer on duty tried to soothe her. "Maybe he's just found another woman." "How can you say something like that?" Vanessa protested. "My husband is completely different. He's a devoted family man. What's going on here?" the investigating officer asked, emerging in response to Vanessa's indignant outcry. After listening to Vanessa, the police officer took her statement, but he warned her right away. "The duty officer is right. It's a harsh climate out there. It's entirely possible he got lost." Vanessa felt her lips tremble. She truly didn't know what to do next. If it were possible, she would have gone there immediately, but she understood that the children couldn't be left alone. Stepping outside, she took a deep breath. She had never felt so helpless before. Remembering the nightmare, the seamstress covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a sob. If it was true, if what she had seen was real, then perhaps it was already too late to search for her husband. No, I won't think about this." Vanessa resolutely shook her head. "I refuse to believe it, refuse to accept Martin's death. I can't lose him as well." Covering her face with her hands, Vanessa sat down on a small bench in the courtyard and quietly wept. Her sobs shook her shoulders until the mother of many had cried out all her tears. Most of all in the world, she feared believing the investigators' words. Vanessa didn't want to and couldn't come to terms with the idea that she might never see her husband again. 2 more months passed, during which Vanessa, as best she could, managed the children on her own. It was a tough job, especially when the main support, her missing husband, was gone. Every day, Vanessa first went to the church to pray for her missing husband, and then she invariably stopped by the police station to check if there was any news about Martin. However, every time, the investigator just sympathetically shook his head. He couldn't rob Vanessa of hope, but he couldn't ignore the facts either. Martin was most likely dead. In financial terms, Vanessa was also facing a very difficult situation. The children required constant care, not to mention food and clothing, and Vanessa had been living on maternal benefits all this time. Her elderly mother tried to help her daughter by sending part of her pension. After Anna's death, Kimberly's heart problems had worsened, and Vanessa tried to visit her elderly mother as often as possible, bringing her everything she needed. But as they say, when it rains, it pours, and another dramatic event occurred in Vanessa's life. Anna's eldest son, Basil, began complaining to Vanessa about chest pains. Upon hearing this, Vanessa felt a coldness wash over her. Could Basil have something wrong with his heart? Vanessa thought with horror as she hurried to take her nephew to the doctor. "Your son has a congenital heart defect," the doctor at the children's hospital diagnosed after examining the boy. "How is that possible?" a shocked Vanessa asked. "He's never complained of chest pain before. He's always been an active child. That's the tricky thing about this condition," the doctor calmly explained. "It can go unnoticed for years before it shows any symptoms, but typically, it presents itself at a very young age. Regardless, Basil needs surgery, and the sooner we perform it, the higher the chances of his recovery." "Of course, I'm ready," Vanessa replied without hesitation. When can we do it? The doctor looked at her seriously. The thing is, there are many children in need of this surgery. You'll need to get in line, and it's quite long. How long will Basil have to wait? Vanessa asked, looking the doctor in the eyes. Well, you're a mother of many children, so you're entitled to a certain quota, the doctor evasively replied. Some wait for a year, or even longer. Is there really no other option? There is, of course. The doctor lowered his gaze. A private and scheduled surgery. When the doctor mentioned the amount for the surgery, Vanessa let out a sigh. Lord, I couldn't save up that much money in 10 years. The mother of many slowly walked down the street, contemplating where she could find the money. Of course, she could try approaching the relevant organizations, describe her situation to them. Maybe it would help expedite the process and move Basil up the waiting list. However, Vanessa could well imagine that it might all turn out to be a scam, and they wouldn't receive any money. Vanessa took a deep breath and stopped. For a brief moment, she felt like she couldn't go on. She was ready to surrender to fate and let events unfold. She felt her strength, quite literally, leaving her. Her heart began to race in her chest, and then a sudden heaviness overwhelmed her. Vanessa leaned against the wall of a nearby house, just in case. I can't. Vanessa whispered to herself. I can't go on. Losing her sister, husband, and now facing the possibility of losing her eldest nephew. It was all just overwhelming for Vanessa. Is this the end of it all? She thought. Is it going to end like this, and will I have to bury Basil too? Imagining what this decision might lead to, Vanessa felt as if something inside her was pushing her forward, urging her to keep going. With every step, the mother of many could feel adrenaline coursing through her veins. Vanessa, pull yourself together. A child's life depends on you right now. Will you let him die without doing everything possible to prevent this terrible ending to his little life? Vanessa firmly decided that she would try her luck and get in line for the free surgery. However, Vanessa wasn't planning to stop there and throw in the towel. She intended to approach a bank and apply for a loan. Whatever happens, whatever the bank's decision may be, I have to do everything to get the money for Basil's surgery. If not in this bank, then in another, but I will definitely find a way. The determined mother thought. She vowed to herself that she would do everything in her power to make her nephew healthy again. On that day, Vanessa was more anxious than ever. She entered the bank building and headed straight to the loan department where they were supposed to review her application. The day before, she had filled out all the paperwork, and today she was supposed to meet with the manager to discuss the loan. However, in the general waiting area, Vanessa witnessed an unpleasant scene. The bank security guard was trying to escort a middle-aged woman, who looked to be in her 60s, out of the building. Moreover, he was doing it in a very rude manner. Listen, lady, get out of here. Why are you bothering people? The security guard scolded her. I'm not bothering anyone at all. The elderly woman tried to protest. I'm just as much a customer as everyone else here, and I demand respectful treatment. Maybe I want to open an account in your bank. Upon hearing the woman's words about opening an account, the security guard burst into laughter. What kind of account, Granny? Accounts are opened by people who have money. You better go home. After that, the man roughly grabbed the elderly woman by the elbow and forcibly dragged her towards the exit. How dare you? Let me go immediately. I demand you call the manager. The woman shouted. Vanessa couldn't remain silent and was deeply shocked by what she saw. The lady didn't look destitute. She was dressed quite decently in a clean blouse and a knitted cardigan, along with a long skirt made of thick fabric and flat-soled shoes. Her silver hair completed the image, making her look like a librarian. Excuse me, but you must release this woman. Vanessa approached the security guard, unable to contain herself. She's right. She has every right to inquire and conduct business in this bank, just like any other customer. And who are you exactly? The security guard asked angrily, looking at Vanessa. Or do you want to leave too? I can arrange that for you right now. How can you be so shameless? Vanessa retorted and tried to free the elderly client from the security guard's grasp. Hey, don't touch me! He yelled at her, and a heated argument ensued between Vanessa, the security guard, and the elderly woman. They couldn't avoid having witnesses. Several people had stopped to watch and listen to the unfolding scandal. Within a few minutes, the bank manager emerged in response to the commotion. He was livid. What's going on here, Ian? How could you behave this way with women? Calm down right now and release them. The security guard had no choice but to obey the order. As soon as he let go of the elderly lady's arm, the banker turned his disapproving gaze toward her and Vanessa. And what's happening here, ladies? What all this shouting? Do you realize that your behavior is tarnishing our reputation? I'm sorry, but we didn't start this. Vanessa quietly responded and proceeded to explain the entire situation to the bank manager. Upon learning that his employee had acted so rudely, the banker promised that he would have a serious talk with him and withhold his bonus. Nevertheless, you should have remained calm, the bank manager said to Vanessa before turning to the elderly lady who had stepped aside, and you should have gone straight to the relevant department. At that moment, Vanessa, feeling awkward, was already thinking that after such an incident, she probably shouldn't expect her loan application to be approved. But could she have acted differently? She was accustomed to showing respect to her elders and couldn't stand by while this lady was mistreated. It was, in her understanding, inhumane. Suddenly, the elderly woman, unexpectedly, raised her head proudly and addressed the banker. You know, your bank has the most atrocious service of any I've ever seen. With these words, the old lady, to the astonishment of those around, removed her silver wig and wiped away her makeup. Everyone was taken aback by the transformation they witnessed. Vanessa was speechless, watching as the elderly woman turned into a young and attractive girl, someone her own age. Have you lost your mind? What's with all this charade? The banker asked her angrily, pointing at the wig. The young woman looked the manager in the eye and spoke sharply. That's none of your business. Here, take this. She handed him her passport and another document. This is my father's will, made out in my name. The documents specify the safe deposit box number where my money and family heirlooms are kept, and I want to access them immediately. The manager was greatly surprised but took the documents and examined them carefully before asking, "Why didn't you come to me with this question right away?" The young woman looked at the banker appraisingly, as if deciding whether to trust him, and then sighed. I had to disguise myself because there are people following me on the street, hired by my husband. He's launched a real hunt for me and my money. I fear for my life. Isabella, that's what the wealthy heiress was called, was speaking the plain truth about her young husband. Daniel did indeed intend to seize all of her wealth. However, there was an even more compelling reason behind his actions. Having grown up in an orphanage, Daniel got involved with what is commonly referred to as the wrong crowd at an early age. The guys Daniel hung out with worked for criminal bosses and engaged in robberies. Over time, Daniel became a top-notch thief, but he aspired to much more. He felt a certain potential within himself. So, after giving up petty theft, he decided to attend school and then pursued a degree in economics, which he managed to get on a scholarship. Daniel turned out to be quite intelligent, and this allowed him to secure a job at Ethan's company, Isabella's father. Daniel embarked on a long journey, climbing the ladder from the very bottom of the business empire to its top manager. He dreamed of becoming at least Ethan's assistant, but no matter what he did, Ethan never saw him in that role. The longer Daniel worked with the millionaire, the more he envied him. He wanted to become the head of this vast business empire himself, to occupy the director's chair currently held by the cantankerous old man. Do you even remember how to manage your company anymore? Daniel couldn't help but say one day, don't you understand that it's long overdue for a change here? Your approach is slowly but surely ruining the firm day by day. If you had just allowed me to try and change some of the internal processes in the company, you would be amazed at the high profits we could achieve, and in the shortest possible time. Instead of a response, the enraged millionaire slammed his palm down on the table. Silence. Foolish boy, did you really think I would entrust you with running the entire company? Have you lost your mind? Who do you think you are? A genius? You're just a manager, nothing more. A person who deals with sales issues, even at the highest level. Everyone needs to know their place, Daniel, including you. If you think I'll lose a valuable employee by firing you, you're sorely mistaken. There are no indispensable people. With these words, the businessman turned his back to Daniel in his chair, indicating that their conversation was over. Daniel was seething with anger and resentment as he left the chief's office. From that moment on, The young top manager harbored an intense hatred for the millionaire. He swore to himself that one way or another, he would acquire the man's company and would do whatever it took, even if it meant resorting to criminal activities. Several months after that conversation, fortune unexpectedly took a rather unusual turn for Daniel. Ethan had been suffering from heart problems for a long time, and one day he had a heart attack right in the middle of a business meeting. Unfortunately, the paramedics arrived too late. The businessman's life was cut short. At the boss's funeral, Daniel carefully observed Ethan's daughter, Isabella. It was at that moment that a sinister plan began to take shape in the manager's mind. What if he were to become the husband of the grieving heiress? Captivating a distraught young woman, overwhelmed by grief at such an hour, wouldn't be too difficult. Then, once they were married and she inherited her rights, all that would remain for Daniel was to dispose of her and gain full control of the company as the first-in-line heir. Having made up his mind, Daniel began turning his plan into reality. He became Isabella's most attentive and caring companion, accompanying her everywhere after the funeral and in the days that followed. Isabella willingly accepted his sympathy, support, and signs of affection, and despite mourning her father, she fell in love with this handsome and caring young man. The young couple started dating, and very soon their passionate romance evolved into preparations for a wedding, which took place without a hitch. Daniel was extremely pleased with himself. All that was left was to wait a little, and the company would be his. Happy Isabella didn't notice any ulterior motives. She enjoyed her new status and life with her beloved, until she accidentally overheard a phone conversation between her fiancé and an accomplice discussing the details of her imminent elimination. According to him, Isabella was supposed to have a fatal accident, and all the hitman needed to do was cut the brake hose in her car to ensure she couldn't control it and would perish. Upon hearing that her husband-to-be was planning to kill her, Isabella burst into the room and unleashed a grandiose scandal. Fueled by righteous anger, she kicked Daniel out of her house and forbade him from calling her, threatening to report everything to the police. She promised to file for divorce herself. Of course, Isabella was well aware that if this scoundrel was planning to kill her, he wouldn't back down from his sinister plan. She realized she couldn't trust anyone in her surroundings. She had to change her appearance drastically. Dressing up as an elderly woman, she intended to retrieve her documents from the safety deposit box and relocate them to a more secure location. After that, she planned to hire additional security to ensure Daniel couldn't approach her anymore. The banker carefully verified all of Isabella's passport information and was finally convinced that he was dealing with a wealthy heiress, the daughter of a well-known businessman. The businessman's name was widely recognized in the region due to his generous donations and support for the less fortunate, earning him immense respect from the people. Showering Isabella with kindness, the manager escorted the young woman to the vault, completely forgetting about Vanessa, who didn't even get a chance to inquire about her loan application. Meanwhile, the banker stepped away to a safe distance and made a phone call. In reality, he had already been paid handsomely to inform Daniel when the wealthy heiress would come to the bank. Daniel would then immediately send his men to fetch his wife. However, Isabella proved to be no fool. She quickly sensed that the bank manager was behaving strangely. He kept glancing at his watch and seemed visibly nervous. Hurriedly gathering all her documents and valuables into a bag, Isabella dashed out into the bank's lobby. The manager yelled something after her, but it didn't matter much at that point. Waiting by the bank's entrance was a taxi. Grabbing Vanessa, who was utterly bewildered by the turn of events, Isabella simply said, "Get in the car. I owe you. You're the only one who stood up for me. I'll tell you everything on the way." Vanessa complied, even though she couldn't understand the meaning of what was happening. However, as soon as the driver pressed the gas pedal and the car started moving, two of Daniel's henchmen rushed out from around the corner. The tall thugs exchanged bewildered glances. They hadn't expected such agility from an ordinary girl. Later, inside the car, Isabella shared her story, not forgetting to mention the previous attempt on her life. "Of course, he didn't try to kill me himself. He used trusted individuals for that," the girl explained. "I hadn't even filed for divorce yet, and he had already planned everything. That scoundrel." "Why didn't you go to the police?" Vanessa asked. "I tried," she replied honestly, "but I have no concrete evidence, just verbal confessions that I overheard." During the interrogation, Daniel played it smart. pretending he didn't understand anything. He said we had recently separated, and since then, he preferred not to communicate with me. Can you believe it? Isabel even slapped the back of the car seat in frustration. Now, I have to be constantly careful because of him. I only change my appearance because of this. Do you think I enjoy wearing this wig and tons of makeup? Vanessa nodded in understanding but didn't say anything. She had her own problem to deal with. She didn't want to get involved in the affairs of the rich. Hey, why are you so sad? Isabella asked her. She looked into the eyes of the mother of many children. Come on, I can see there's something bothering you. Tell me, maybe I can help. Vanessa sighed. My nephew is seriously ill, and he needs an operation, but I don't have the money. What's the problem? Isabella responded. I'll help you pay for your boy's surgery. I can see you're a good person. If you can pay me back later, great. If not, it's fate. But I want to thank you for your kindness. Vanessa was taken aback. She hadn't expected the wealthy heiress to get involved in the fate of her sick child. Thank you, she said. If there's anything I can do for you. Nonsense. Isabella waved it off, but then unexpectedly made an offer. Listen, would you like to work as a maid for me? I need a new employee right now. Accept, and you won't regret it. You can even move into my house with your kids. We have plenty of space. Are you serious? Vanessa asked. Of course, I'd gladly accept your offer. The mother of many children couldn't believe her luck. In one day, she had solved her main financial problem and found a good job that wouldn't require her to be separated from her children. Thank you, Lord. Vanessa thought to herself. It seems my prayers have finally been heard. Vanessa moved into Isabella's mansion and began working as her maid, which brought her much-needed peace of mind. Basil had a successful operation, and Isabella covered all the expenses. The boy was now in rehabilitation and recovering well. The mother of many children was overjoyed. Most importantly, her nephew was going to be okay. She felt immensely grateful to the wealthy heiress and, as a result, was extra diligent in performing all the household chores. Isabella didn't have children of her own, so she enjoyed spending time with Vanessa's kids. In a way, they all became like family to her. A month after Vanessa started living in the wealthy heiress's house, the two women became close friends. Vanessa shared her story about her missing husband and all the hardships she had endured in his absence. One day, Isabella called Vanessa over and excitedly shared some news she was pregnant with Daniel's child. I found out just a couple of days ago, blushing. The heiress told her friend. I didn't want to tell anyone until I was sure, but this morning, I got my test results, and the doctor confirmed it. I'm going to be a mom. Can you imagine? Vanessa was genuinely happy for Isabella but noticed a hint of sadness on her face. She asked, Are you worried about what will happen if Daniel finds out? In response, the wealthy heiress raised her head proudly and said, Not a chance. I won't even tell that scoundrel anything. After all, he has no more connection to me or my child. As promised, Isabella increased security in her home and, with the help of the city's top lawyer, managed to expedite her divorce from Daniel. Now, the wealthy heiress was completely free and did her best to forget about her ex-husband. One day, when Isabella was not at home, Vanessa received a phone call. Hello, she said, perplexed. The number on the phone screen was unfamiliar to her. Vanessa, darling, a voice on the other end said, leaving the maid utterly stunned. Martin, she stammered, is it really you? But, how? I was told by the police that you were already dead. Martin could only manage to ask in response, My God, my love, how could you ever think I'd leave you and our children? The man on the other end of the line let out a deep sigh. When I returned home, I couldn't find you or the kids in our old apartment. The neighbor said you were working as a maid in some wealthy house and gave me your new phone number. He explained. Yes, it's true. Vanessa replied slowly and then gave him the address. Come as soon as you can, Martin. I'm so relieved that you're alive. An hour later, when he arrived at the mansion, Vanessa rushed into his arms and hugged him tightly, just like she did on the day of their last meeting. She had lost all hope of ever seeing her husband alive again. Later, while sitting in the kitchen and sipping hot tea that Vanessa had prepared for him, Martin shared his story. I was in a serious accident back then. I lost control of the car, and it went off the road into a ditch. The snowstorm that day was horrendous. If it hadn't been for a guy from the nearby village named James, I might have actually died." Martin looked at his wife with a hint of embarrassment. "But why didn't you contact us for so long?" Vanessa asked, her eyes filled with tears. "The hospital James managed to carry me to was in such a remote area that there was no mobile reception there at all. I was in treatment for a very long time, and I was so weak that I could hardly grasp what was happening around me." Martin told Vanessa that James had helped him during that time, and they had become good friends. "My phone was broken, so I couldn't call you when I finally regained consciousness," Martin said apologetically. "As soon as we had the chance, James and I immediately returned home. He's from our town too, and as soon as I got here, I came straight to you and the kids. I only arrived yesterday." Martin warmly embraced his wife once more and buried his face in her silky hair. "My dear, you have no idea how much I missed you all, how worried I was," he confessed. Vanessa tenderly kissed her husband and then, with a trembling voice, said, "Darling, if you only knew how much has happened to us during this time." Vanessa proceeded to tell him about the operation and how she had met Isabella, whose house they were currently in. When the wealthy friend returned from her office and found a stranger in her house, she was quite surprised. Vanessa introduced her husband and briefly explained the situation. Isabella turned out to be very kind-hearted and understanding. She allowed Martin to stay with them until he figured out his future plans and found a suitable place for their large family to live, since their old apartment was now being rented to someone else. Shortly after, Martin introduced Isabella to his friend, none other than James. The young engineer was greatly impressed by the bold and confident woman who could single-handedly manage a huge company. In James, Isabella saw the kindred spirit she had always been searching for. He was a simple yet educated guy who, as it turned out, understood her far better than many of her wealthy acquaintances. Soon after this meeting, James and Isabella began dating. They often invited Vanessa and Martin to join them at cafes or go out together with the kids. James was unfazed by the fact that Isabella was pregnant from her ex-husband. He intended to adopt the child as soon as they got married. As it happened, James's uncle served in the police force. Learning about his beloved's dramatic history, he decided to share everything with his uncle, seeking his support in case Daniel, Isabella's ex-husband, tried to re-enter her life. Isabella had reasons to worry since Daniel had found out about her pregnancy. He had been persistently trying to meet and talk to his ex-wife, clearly hoping for some sort of settlement. Isabella didn't hide anything from James and told him about her ex-husband's persistence. James wasted no time in addressing the issue, and he and Martin personally tracked down Isabella's former spouse. "Listen carefully and remember," James said, staring intently at the scoundrel. "If you so much as attempt to contact Isabella again or, God forbid, harm her and her child," he continued, "rest assured, I can find and provide the police with evidence that you have direct connections to the local criminal underworld, from childhood even. You'll be looking at a prison sentence of 10 years or more. Do you understand me?" Furious with rage, Daniel began hurling terrible curses at the men but, as a precaution, chose to retreat as far as possible from them and his former wife. Several more months passed. Isabella's due date was approaching. Throughout her pregnancy, Vanessa and Martin supported and encouraged her, while James was always by her side, showering her with love and care. When it was time for Isabella to give birth, it turned out that the wealthy heiress would have to undergo a cesarean section. These were Isabella's first childbirth, and unfortunately, they were not without complications. During the surgery, the young woman lost a significant amount of blood, necessitating an urgent blood transfusion. Of course, Vanessa offered to donate her blood to her friend. However, when the lab technicians brought back the test results, they left the mother of many children in utter shock. "Vanessa, we're really fortunate that the mother-to-be is your biological sister. This significantly reduces the risks of blood transfusion," the medical staff informed her. "What? How is that possible?" the bewildered girl asked. "What are you talking about? We're not sisters, we're just friends." The lab technician looked at her with clear puzzlement and said, "That's strange. There can't be any mistakes. The tests show that you have nearly identical markers. This usually only happens with very close relatives." Vanessa felt utterly bewildered. She couldn't understand how this could be, especially when she already had one sister. She left the hospital and went straight to her mother's house to learn more about her childhood. Typically, their mother never revealed anything about how she and Anna came into the world. Vanessa had always found this strange, but she had been too shy to ask her mother directly. Approaching their family home, Vanessa was filled with anxiety. Her mother already had heart problems, and now she was about to ask her something that could only make the elderly woman feel worse. On the other hand, this was the kind of situation where a daughter couldn't just let things be. She had to uncover the truth. Initially, Kimberly pretended not to understand what her daughter was talking about, but eventually, she couldn't hold back the tears and confessed that she had adopted both girls from an orphanage. Vanessa was shocked. "I didn't want to separate you," she tearfully admitted to her daughter. "You both were so little, so sweet and scared. How could I have taken only one of you? Of course, I took both. Just to be sure." Vanessa asked, "Are you certain there were two of us?" "Absolutely. That's what the director of the orphanage told me." On that day, Vanessa left her mother's house with deeply conflicted feelings. No, she wasn't angry or resentful, but she couldn't understand why her mother knew nothing about Isabella. And then it struck her. Vanessa asked James to inquire with his uncle. Perhaps he could shed some light on the matter. James willingly agreed, knowing how important this was to his beloved fiancée. It turned out that the culprit behind this situation was the director of the orphanage, who had intentionally kept Isabella hidden from Vanessa's future adoptive mother. He hoped to secure a large sum of money by placing Isabella with a wealthy businessman's family. As a result, the triplets Vanessa, Anna, and Isabella were separated at a young age. Later on, Isabella simply forgot about her childhood years in the orphanage, and the businessman chose not to tell her anything, possibly fearing her reaction to the news that she was an adoptive child and not biologically related to him. When Vanessa shared all of this with her close friend, Isabella was astonished. She never expected that, in helping a stranger, she would ultimately find not only an excellent friend, but also her biological sister. Now, all the hardships were behind their families. Isabella gave birth to a beautiful baby girl they named Naomi. A month after their daughter's birth, Isabella and James had a beautiful and joyful wedding. Vanessa happily looked after Naomi while the young parents enjoyed their well-deserved rest. Martin secured a good job in the city, and Vanessa, Martin, and their children moved into a spacious new apartment in the city center. Today, both couples are completely happy and can confidently look to the future, having overcome all the trials life threw at them. Vanessa and Isabella often visit the grave of their deceased sister, silently standing by her tombstone.